Joel chapter 2. Good to be here with you guys talking about that. But I take care of some business from last week. I don't like having to do stuff like this, but every once in a while I have to get on to you guys for behavior issues. And last week I noticed you let me go 8 minutes overtime and nobody said a word. I just kept on going. And then afterwards somebody told me, hey, you know that clock's wrong. No, I didn't know that clock was wrong. I was watching the clock and it said, oh, it's time. And it was almost 10 minutes overtime. So if somebody doesn't say something, you see where this goes? I could go out of control here. So, yeah.
We genuinely thought we were going till 7 for some reason.
You're kind. Anyhow, might need some help. We're going to keep an eye on this clock and see if it behaves today. But if someone could, this class is supposed to be, this study is supposed to be wrapping up at 7:30. So if someone could kind of give me wink, wink, nod, nod, or a little gesture to let me know when it's 7:30. So I'm not still going, that's fine.
No,
yeah.
okay. Does that work?
Or if you have to kick your feet up and start snoring or something, that might help too. All right. Does anyone have anything to share from the back of these cards? Just a reminder, these are the action step cards, the cards that if you want to write something down, I encourage everyone to write something down as a result of studying God's Word. Does anyone have any things to share from their cards? Yeah, Mr. Willie.
Start narrative prayer.
Narrative prayers. All right. We talked about that last time. So narrative prayer. Yep. Has anyone done a narrative prayer before? Anyone here? Yeah. Nice. Did it feel, just be honest, was it weird the first time you did it?
Yes, it was.
Strange?
You got to talk to yourself anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Sure. For me, it was very much weird. It was sort of like, my dad challenged me several years back. He kind of threw out this challenge of, when you read about prayer in the Bible, how much of it is silent prayer? That's so common today, but how many of the prayers in the Bible are actually silent prayers? And truthfully, I can't tell that many at all of them, maybe a couple, but not many are silent prayers. So I thought, I should actually say it. And just being alone in the car, talking out loud, boy, that was a little strange. That took some getting used to. I realized, man, I take a lot for granted. I kind of mumble my thoughts away and, oh yeah, God, you're all knowing. You just fill all this in for me. Thanks so much. But when I actually have to say it, I catch myself like, wow, never mind, Father. I don't know why I'm even praying this. This doesn't make any sense. Why am I asking this? So having to say it out loud, there's some benefit to that has been beneficial to me. So narrative prayer, just talking about your day to God, that's allowed. There's examples of that in the Bible. So that's so cool. Thank you, Willie. For me, it was intercessory prayer. That was my takeaway from last week is, a lot of times I don't take time to have a real focused prayer on behalf of a focused situation. So I need to spend a little bit more time praying for our president. That's one thing that I just find so many other things to pray for that I forget, I should be praying for President Trump as well. That's important. So one of the goals I have as we move on. All right, good deal. Anyone else have anything to share? Okay, well, Joel chapter 2 then. I believe we left off right around verse 5, if I'm not mistaken. Does that sound close? In the ballpark? I don't hear a no. Okay. Well, Joel chapter 2. Now, what's the difference between Joel 2 and Joel 1? Joel chapter 1 talks about the great judgment of the locust plague that's coming. This terrible plague that's going to wipe out the crops, devastate the people, stop proper temple worship from taking place like it should, and just ruin everyone from the most high up officials to the people who would rather just get drunk and forget about it all. None of them are going to be able to live life the way they're used to it because it's all thrown off because of this terrible plague. Wipes out all the food. Then we got into chapter 2 and we discussed, is it still a locust plague? Maybe. It could be a locust plague, and a number of commentators are going to take that particular view. However, it seems as though he's shifted and he's talking about military invasion using the image of locusts. So he's still using the picture of locusts, but just like this locust plague that we talked about in chapter 1, just like those locusts, here comes the soldiers. Here comes the men of war that are coming here in chapter 2. And if he's talking about that, probably don't know for certain, but probably nothing super specific in mind. Just the general battles that were fought by two major nations in the next few centuries to come, right? We have the Assyrians. They're going to come in. Who are the Assyrians going to take over?
North.
The northern kingdom, right? Samaria is capital of the northern kingdom, so they're going to take away the 10 northern tribes. Then the remaining Judah, they're going to last a little bit longer. Assyria is going to fizzle out. This great battle of Carchemish, world powers change and shift. And then we have a new world power, Babylon. And Hezekiah makes a mistake, getting a little too friendly with them, just showing them around, letting them see everything. And then what happens? Not too much longer, they come in and they will take into captivity the people of the south. So they will eventually, through a process of waves, it wasn't as though it all happened right at once, but the date 586, 587 BC, right around there, it's probably a good date to pick for when the south fell. And then Jerusalem's going to lose her city walls and be crumbled. And then the last part of the Old Testament is reading about that period of time where Jerusalem is fallen, people have all been in exile, and they get to return during the time of the Persians. So that's toward the end of the Bible. That's beyond where we are here. So he's probably predicting what's going to happen to both the north and the south. This is probably written around 800 BC, so that's what we're guessing here, okay? So he's picturing, I think, physical armies and what kind of thing they're going to do. Again, this is poetry. Like I've got verse 3 up here, and keep in mind, as I say before, this is small so that you read it in your own Bible because that's better. Don't just take my computer's word for it. It says, a fire consumes before them, behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of the Garden of Eden before them, but a desolate wilderness behind them. Yeah, I don't think the land is literally like the Garden of Eden. That's some pretty nice land from what we hear, right? That's some really good stuff. This is just poetry. This is just a picture. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And then it is exhausted. It's wasted. Kind of a hyperbole to emphasize how devastating these armies are going to be. Verse 4 says their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses, so they run. Verse 5, with the noise of chariots, they leap on the tops of the mountains, like a crackling of a flame of fire consuming the stubble, like a mighty people arranged for battle. Now, I don't remember I think we briefly touched on this last week, but Israel never had much of a cavalry. Horses in particular would be a pretty scary thing for them because they were never known for having a huge amount of horses in battle. So you could hear them coming, and this is just a picture of how scary that battle's going to be. It's just going to be pretty bad. So God is lead, and that's, let me skip to verse 11 real quick because we got to ask the question. Look in verse 11. Who is leading the army? Who is leading the army?
The Lord.
The Lord utters his voice before his army. What's this army doing again? Who's it going against?
Israel.
It's going against the people of God. And the Lord himself is leading the army. Now, do you realize how that would be received to them? The kind of shock that would be experienced by these people. When God leads an army, who's that army? Well, in the mind of Jews, it's the Jews. It's the Jewish army. It always talks about the Lord going out before them, right? When did God go out before them in battle? Can you think of any examples?
Oh, sure.
Plenty, right? Like what?
The king of Canaan.
The Canaanites?
Yeah, Jericho.
Yeah, the walls of Jericho. Yeah, absolutely. And then many other battles. Now, the first time they went in there, he was going to go with them. Like, no, we're too scared. I'm like, all right, you'll just go on your own. And that didn't work out so well. But when God was with them, yeah, Jericho. God sent the hornet into the land to scare all those people. Yeah. So God constantly led his people, not only into battle, but even into the wilderness. They didn't all die out there. One generation did, but they survived. Their kids came into Canaan, right? God led them out of Egypt through the Red Sea. God's been leading them. they don't think of God as leading a bunch of other people, right? But God makes it clear, yeah, I'll lead the army against you guys. So God is leading a foreign army. That might be a little bit mind-shattering to them. Remember how the nation of Israel began? Where do you trace the beginning of the people of God, the Israelites?
In Egypt.
Yeah. Were the people of God around before Egypt?
Well, that's true. It started with Abraham.
Yeah, I would go back to Abraham, really. I mean, we could definitely nitpick Noah's sons, and there was the blessing on each of the three, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And God said, I'm going to enlarge the tents of Shem, so something special is coming through him, sure. But when you get to Abraham, so this would be right around Genesis chapter 12, right? God handpicks this guy. Now, why did God handpick this guy? I love this. You know why he did, right? Because he wanted to. Because he's God. He said, I've chosen you out of all these people, out of Ur, the Chaldees. I want you to go to the land that I promised you. What was there about Abraham? There was nothing that we know of about Abraham that merited this decision. This was just God. This was the original grace, if you will. God just said, I'm going to make you and your household, you're going to be a special people. So the Israelites, the people of God, the Jews, as they became, they had this special relationship with God, but the only reason they had it in the beginning was because God just chose them. They didn't do anything to deserve it. But after a while, they kind of, I guess, developed a bit of this sense of entitlement where, of course God's going to be with us. He always has, and this is just the way it is. And so to hear these words hundreds of years later that, no, I'm coming against you now, it's just going to be a real, real shock to them. Especially if we're right about the date when Joel is writing, if he's one of the earliest of the minor prophets, even more astounding because he would be writing before the major armies, even Assyria, before they came in and conquered any of God's people. So I don't think people would, at this time, even be ready to accept the thought that God would let his people down. They might think somebody like this is a heretic or something for saying these words. But he is going to be proven right. So God's leading the army. Verse 6, before them the people are in anguish, all faces turn pale. Excuse me. They run like mighty men, they climb the wall like soldiers, and they each march in line, nor do they deviate from their paths. They do not crowd each other, they march everyone in his path. When they burst through the defenses, they do not break ranks. They rush on the city, they run on the wall, they climb into the houses, they enter through the windows like a thief. Like a thief. Okay. These verses are some of the verses that to me make it sound like probably not talking about locusts anymore. Because when he says they each march in their line and they don't deviate from their path, it definitely sounds like a military campaign, right? Like soldiers lined up for battle going in. Now, I realize I could be wrong about this. It could still be the locusts, and God's just using kind of an example of locust after locust. They're coming in, they're devastating the crops. It's awful. But it seems like when I think about locusts, I don't think about marching in any sort of line or order. I think of it's a swarm. It is just a nonstop. It's a nonstop cloud of them. So it just, to me, it seems like this language is describing more of an actual military troops or whatever. So, all right, nobody seems to think otherwise. Sounds good to me. They rush on the city, run on the wall. Okay, so in verse 6, we'll pull it back up there. Before them, the peoples are in anguish. Nations or peoples. That's not just one group. So why would he say peoples and not the people? Why would he emphasize multiple groups?
Well, if it's either Assyria or Babylon, they're going to take over more than just the Jews.
Sure. If he is referring to them, absolutely, I agree. And this is just a little reminder to me that many, many times judgment does not just stay specifically, the effects of judgment and catastrophe doesn't just stay in line with the people who are completely guilty. Many times, innocent people or neutral people or people who are just in the area, they suffer from this kind of stuff too. We just can't leave that out. So I think that's why he's emphasizing this is a big enough attack. It's going to devastate multiple peoples. Little things like that to me are very significant because even though it doesn't seem like much here, you read about in other passages, and I believe it's Ezekiel that talks about Tyre, right? And he says many nations, many peoples are going to come up against her and lay siege to her. And that was interesting because I'm like, well, hold on, it was just two. It was just Babylon and it was the Greeks later, Alexander the Great. But then I went to a class where a guy went into more detail and he explained the way Alexander did it is he didn't have much of a navy himself. So he put it out to all the other nations. He's like, hey guys, you know me, you know I'll kill you if you don't do what I say. So get your navy over here and take over this city now. And he literally got many nations to bring their vessels over and attack the coastal, not the sea side city of Tyre. So that's literally what happened. And the Bible said that way in advance. So that's a really good thing. Okay. Verse 7 and 8 makes it seem more like a human army. I already mentioned that. Apparently, though, this is before the fall of Jerusalem in 586. Why would I say that based on verse 9? Why would I say this is before Jerusalem fell and not after?
It's running on the wall.
You're running on the wall, exactly. And in 586, wall's gone. Wall's gone. Now, did you notice, though, it says not just that they rush on the wall, they climb into the houses as well. Some of you guys probably already knew this. If any of you have done any study, Willie, didn't you look into the walls of Jericho one time? Didn't you do some studying there?
Yeah.
Because there's Rahab and stuff. And what do we know about Rahab? She was told to tie that cord and stuff out her window.
Which is in the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing the line of work that she was in, it kind of makes sense with the people passing by and stuff that she would want one of those houses that would be in the wall for people to discreetly come in and out, right? But that was a common thing. It was very common for cities to have dwellings built right into the walls surrounding it. And in the case of Jericho, I believe, and there's some other ones, it was often common for them to have multiple walls too. They'd have a row of walls. They'd have their, wall junior and then wall senior. You know what I mean? So they would double up their defenses. And I know some archaeologists really think that's the way Jericho was. That it had multiple walls lined up in front. So that's probably what he's talking about there. This does not seem like a brand new army to me, though. This to me seems like a group that knows what they're doing. It seems like they're very skilled and entering through the windows like a thief. That has the element of surprise to it. So we are not dealing with rookies here. We're dealing with an army that knows what they're doing, and God's leading them. Before them, the earth quakes. This is verse 10. The heavens tremble. The sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. The Lord utters his voice before his army. Surely his camp is very great, for strong is he who carries out his word. The day of the Lord is indeed great and very awesome. Who can endure it? I like these verses because they help put into context some language of warfare that is often misunderstood. And later on, we're going to read this same language a little further in this chapter. And I think people sometimes misunderstand it. They're looking for signs that maybe aren't going to happen the way they imagine, right? But in verse 10, it talks about the earth quaking, heavens tremble, sun, moon grow dark, stars lose brightness, all right? How is that a picture of judgment? Well, it is a picture of judgment, but can anyone explain why that would be? Okay, well, if you want to listen to me, that's fine. Thought you'd had enough, but I'm going to give you two explanations. We're going to come back to these later on, maybe not tonight, but later on. Two explanations, and I think both have very good merit, right? One is a little bit more the physical one, and it makes good sense to me, right? When an army comes and attacks, and it's a very successful army, and they are devastating, what do they bring with them? Well, usually When they overtake a place, do they leave it looking beautiful and then move on to the next place?
Destroy.
They destroy it. What's the fastest means or one of the quickest ways to utterly decimate a place?
Fire.
Fire, right? And if you burn a place down effectively, so it is just engulfed in flames, what do you see?
Smoke.
Yeah, lots of smoke. Now, if there is enough smoke all throughout this, I mean, we've been close to a number of fires, right? When it's pretty bad, what happens? All of a sudden, the sky is not so bright out, right?
Yep.
And at night, they'll even talk about the blood moon, right? The moon turned to blood kind of a thing. Yeah, you literally cannot see like you should. So picturing an army here talking about this kind of language, I think they would understand what this means. For sure. Yeah, that's what happens when a really awful war is taking place. The sky is blackened because there's so much smoke you just can't see a thing. Now, that is true. There is another possibility here that I think has some merit to it. And so this is interesting. When you go back to page 1 of your Bible, right? Page number 1, God's creating stuff. How is he creating stuff? He's just speaking it into existence. Boom. And then there it is, right? God spoke. One of those things that he spoke, he said, you know what? Let's have some lights in the sky. Light for daytime and light for nighttime, right? And then later on, we've got the stars and stuff. But you remember, does your Bible even say it this way? You remember what he says about those lights? He says, we're going to have the greater light, and we're going to have the lesser light. The greater light is to what? Govern the day. Govern the day. Lesser light to govern the night. Interesting. So you can even go back to page 1 of your Bible, and you've got a little bit of a picture there of, hey, it's as though some translations I think will say rule, others might say govern, rule over, govern. But, you know, when the sun's outside, it's ruling the day, right? It's all you see. So that language, I think, may have carried on. Well, I think it has carried on because we know the studies, you see all throughout the Bible, the pictures of light versus darkness and significance of those things, right? Well, I think here too, sometimes the idea of governing, the idea of reigning was pictured with the heavenly bodies because you got the greater and lesser lights to rule over the day. So sometimes that may have been the reason why they would say, you know what, the stars are falling from the sky. In reality, what he really means is the rulers, the ones who were governing, the ones who were leading. No more. No more. They're done. So it's a poetic way of saying, I don't know, I'm going to knock your lights out. You know what that means, right? Doesn't mean you've got a switch in you or whatever, but we know, like, it's not going to be the way it is anymore. Same thing with that. So, all right, I think we're right at about our pause point, right? Right at about our break time. So let's go ahead and have a prayer time, and then after that, we'll take just a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and